everybody. This is Billy Joe Faust Coins, and she's going to discuss Christmas in her lifetime while living on the farm.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1926, the very end of the Depression. People did not have jobs. I remember they were lined up to work for what they called the WPA. Minimum wage, but you were lucky to have anything to do. So Christmas was not a big deal when I was growing up. But I had an uncle who worked for the WPA. I remember this. He was a mason, and they had such old equipment. One of the wheels blew off and almost decapitated and killed him. And that was not a big, today it'd be in the newspaper, but it was so common, it wasn't such a big deal. So, usually the day before Christmas, we would have cooking time for cookies or something. We were lucky if we had things to make cookies because it was hard to find sugar. So on the night, Christmas Eve night, Merle, my uncle, but I thought he was my brother, he had a little country western band, and they would come to the house and play music. And Virgie and Mama, Virgie was an aunt that I thought was mine, more than an aunt. I thought she's my mother almost. They made taffy candy and pulled the taffy. That was a big deal. That went on, we always went to bed early. The things we got the next morning would be laughable today. If you got an orange and an apple in your sock, you were very fortunate. I never had a doll in my life when I was growing up. So when your granddaddy and I got married, when I first told him that, he bought me a doll. If you notice, I have several Barbie dolls upstairs. Well, that's where they came from. He bought me many of those because I never had a doll. But I did have one sort of. We had used to at the carnival, we had little candy canes about so high. And in that was a little Cupid doll, what we called it. I did have one of those, but they were not to take off and play with. That was decoration that you left on this little cane. And the next morning when we got up, we were so excited. We had an apple and an orange in our sock. And sometimes a boy, I remember one of the things boys got, there was a little rubber motorcycle about this high. I thought they were great. I thought they were so great. My play toys was cute, was paper dolls cut out of Susan Little catalog. And you made up these stories and played them out with your paper dolls. I never had anything to ride my paper doll on. So one time we were at this boy's house and playing, and I saw that little green rubber motorcycle. And I thought that would be so great. So I stuck it in my pocket and carried it home to ride my paper dolls on. The first time Mama saw me with that, she said, "Where did you get that?" And I told her it was at Miss White's house. She says, "What did you do? Did she give that to you?" And I hesitated, I remember, but I finally told her no, I took it. So she said, "Well, get your coat on." So she made me walk back to Miss White's house and take that motorcycle and give it back to her and tell her. I couldn't tell her I took it. I had to tell her I stole it. I'll never forget that. I never stole another thing in my whole life. I always remembered that. But we had good times. We were together. We had enough to eat. We were very fortunate. During that time, we had hobos. They rode the train. And we had from our house a very short distance to the railroad track, so we got a lot of hobos. Mama always fed them. Many of them would say when they finished eating because they were very hungry. And Sometimes it was a biscuit and gravy. Whatever we had left, that's what she gave. And they'd say, can we do something for you? And there was a time or two she had them cut wood to put in the stove. And they would do it. They were not mean people. They just couldn't find a job. Usually they were like mechanics, masons, did brickwork, carpenters, any kind of construction work. So they were willing to work. There just wasn't anything there. So I don't ever remember wrapped presents. I don't remember having a Christmas tree. It was usually the focal point was that sock that you hung up, and the table where you had candy in. Usually Mama made some kind of lemonade. And that was a big deal for us. And we thought it was great. Because we didn't know anything else. Everybody lived that way around us, the people that lived out in the farm. So in today's world, that wouldn't be much of a Christmas. But really, in our world, it was nice. Good memories.
When's the first time you remember having a Christmas tree?
Having a Christmas tree?
Yeah, or wrapped presents.
Your granddaddy and I were married. Gary was born, having our first tree.
Yeah.
That's when it'd been, at that time I would have been 22 years old. So I guess I was 22 years old when I had the first Christmas tree. Anything else you wanted to ask me about it?
What was your first job?
First job?
Off the farm?
You want me to tell you when I left home?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was a senior in high school. And for the first time in my life, I always grew up thinking Mama and Daddy was my mother and daddy. That was my grandparents. I thought my uncles, the two brothers that lived in the house, I thought they were my brothers. I had no idea. I had an uncle that got an aunt that got mad at me one time. She told me to do something and I wouldn't do it. And she said, well, you don't belong here anyway. I didn't know what she's talking about. She said, well, you know that's not your mother and daddy. I nearly flipped out. So when I could, I went to ask my grandmother. And she said, I always wanted to find a time to tell you, and I never did find the time. So she said, we raised you, and we loved you, and we did the best we could to provide for you. Well, that was such an experience. It was as though, for the first time, you knew you had nothing and nobody. I walked off from home that day. I had several months more to graduate from high school. I walked off and I walked to a friend's house. Lived there, didn't say, I don't know how they communicated, but I stayed there. The only thing I had was clothes on my back. So I stayed at her house and went to school, wore her clothes. They never asked me, when are you going home or why are you staying here? Never asked me that. It was as though this was accepted. But it was after that, I never felt at home anymore. School was out. I graduated. The first thing that happened when school was out, when I was growing up, it was time that cotton had been planted. It was usually about so high by then. And when you planted cotton, it wasn't planted like this. It was planted solid. So you had to go in with a hoe and chop the cotton and leave the space of a hole between those for the cotton to bloom. So it was time to do that. When I was out of school, that was ready to go. I had to lead out. I could never pick cotton, but I could chop cotton. I was fast. Usually we had at least one family, usually blacks, but a family they were called migrant workers. And they went from place to place. So many times you got the same people every summer and spring coming back, till you almost got to know them. Well, it was time for them to come, and Daddy was dependent on me to lead them. They never went faster than the leader. So Daddy would put me at the front of that. It was time for that. One day, 2 girls from high school, I can't even remember their name, they stopped and said, how would you like to go to Dallas with us and live with us and get a job? It just was like a bolt of blue. I was stunned for a few minutes. I said, let me think about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew if I did not do that, I would spend the rest of my life right on a farm leading out cotton choppers. So I walked down to the girls' house and told them I would go with them. The next day, that was on Saturday, the next day was Sunday, I had my few clothes packed in a bag, and I came to Dallas with them, and we lived in one room, the 3 of us. We shared a bathroom. We ate out. There were no kitchen privileges, no nothing. I remember Daddy was so upset because I was leaving. Not because I think I was going as much as he was losing his leading cotton shop. And I came to Dallas. I went to Drones Business College. I already knew shorthand. I already had typing in high school. It was pretty fast. But I wanted to improve my typing skills. So I went to Drones Business College at night. I worked all day at Skiller's drugstore, soda jerk. We opened up early in the morning. We did breakfast, scrambled eggs, bacon, sausage, coffee. We also did malts and milkshakes in the morning. I got the early shift because nobody wanted that one. So I got the early shift, so I would go off, I would be off, I don't know, about 2 or 3 o'clock. So I decided to start to Drones Business College, which I did. I rode the trolley. We would call it something else. Streetcar, that's what we call it. And I'd ride that, and then I'd leave Drones I'd probably spend about 2 or 3 hours every day there until I got my typing skills up and improved my shorthand a little bit more. And decided to quit and try to get a better job. So after I left there, I went to work for Western Auto Company. Did secretarial work. Worked for one of the meanest men. Nothing went right with that guy. He took it out on everyone. Nobody liked him. So that's where I got, that was my next job. It wasn't much better than soda jerk. And I was there for, I don't know how long I was with him, until the man I worked for, I don't know whether he quit or got fired. But anyway, he had to leave, so I lost my job.
Did you always have enough money for the trolley?
Well, one night, I never will forget this, I didn't look in my purse. It cost 10 cents to ride the streetcar. It was dark. I was tired. I'd worked a lot that day. I went out to get on the streetcar, dark, hardly anybody around. I didn't have a dime. I didn't know what in the world I was going to do. I had no idea which way home was. I was a dumb country girl in an unknown world in Dallas. The only way I knew to get home was to follow that trolley track. Only way. I knew that would take me back. I got on the streetcar that night, after that, and I thought, I'm going to look. Then I watched when I were in the streetcar, so I would know my way back after this experience. That night, I started walking. I probably left that Drones, I would say about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. I walked all night long down the trolley track. I got home in time to take a shower and go to work. So after that, when I got on the streetcar, I looked at buildings to get my bearings in case anything else ever happened. That taught me a good lesson.
How did you meet your husband?
We went together.
No.
Yeah, stop it and start a minute.